first off, just thank you all for being here this evening, and to Ein, Tomas, and the staff at CAC for hosting us. Tomas gave a little background about who CARB is. Just as some additional background, we were founded in 1967, and we're part of the California Environmental Protection Agency. Our mission is to promote health, welfare, and ecological resources through the effective reduction of air pollutants. You might have heard about some of our other regulations. Many of them are related to vehicle emissions, but CARB also regulates other sectors, including toxics, locomotives, port and harbor emissions, and we work with the air districts to meet health-based air quality standards. In 2006, CARB became the lead agency for climate change policy and planning in California. California's goal is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions to 40% below 1990 levels by 2030, and then 85% below 1990 levels by 2045. We're a government agency, and we can use a lot of acronyms and terms that are kind of unfamiliar or technical. So if you have any questions, feel free to post those in the chat. If anything's unclear, there are a number of CARB staff on the call, and they can help clarify as we go. We also split our presentation into two parts. So I'll share some basics about the proposed regulation, and then we'll hold about 10 minutes to hear any additional clarifying questions that you might have around the regulation. And then my colleague will share more details about the potential implementation process and needs, and we'll have a further discussion in breakout groups where we're aiming to spend the majority of this time hearing from you. We'll close by sharing some resources and next steps. So while we're going to highlight what we see as the benefits, opportunities, and challenges associated with the regulation, we really want to learn how it could be better designed or implemented by hearing from you and hearing your hopes, concerns, and ideas. So let's start with why cleaner heating equipment within our buildings can improve the lives of Californians. We heard about some of the air quality issues in the region, and the direct emissions from polluting space and water heaters are responsible for about 8% of total statewide climate pollutants. The record high temperatures we've experienced in recent years are evidence of the changes to climate that have been caused by human actions, especially the combustion of fossil fuels. So we think that this proposed regulation presents a real opportunity to reduce a significant amount of California's greenhouse gas emissions. Second, space and water heaters also directly emit air pollutants such as nitrogen oxides and particulate matter, which worsen local air quality and impact public health. 2 California air districts, including here in South Coast, have adopted zero NOx rules for space and water heating equipment to improve air quality and reduce rates of respiratory and health diseases. Reducing greenhouse gases can also reduce these air pollutants. An additional benefit of the proposed regulation is increased access to cooling in homes that previously didn't have air conditioning. This is because heat pumps, one form of zero-emission heating, can both heat and cool. This increased added cooling is important during the more frequent extreme heat events that we've experienced. The proposed regulation also provides a market signal by providing certainty and statewide consistency to manufacturers, consumers, and contractors, which helps to drive innovation and market adoption of zero-emission equipment. The space and heating water proposal is just one element of a broad range of actions and policies that are needed to address air quality and climate change, but we think that it's a powerful one. So CARB's current proposal would require that all new space and water heating equipment sold in California emit no greenhouse gases. In a few slides, I'll share our detailed proposal with different phased compliance dates by different equipment types. But first, I just want to explain what this means for homeowners, renters, and businesses. The statewide regulation would allow folks to continue using, maintaining, or repairing the current space or water heating equipment they have until its end of life. Once it comes time to replace the equipment, and if the regulation is in effect at the time of that replacement, the only new equipment that would be available to buy in California would be zero-emission equipment. I also want to note that South Coast Air Quality Management District, which encompasses Orange County, is also moving forward with zero NOx space and water heating rules. This summer, South Coast approved amendments requiring zero NOx emissions from large water heaters and small boilers starting in 2026 for new buildings, with longer implementation timelines for existing buildings. South Coast is also working on rule updates to require zero NOx residential and commercial furnaces and residential water heaters. They are also developing an incentive program. If you're interested, you can sign up for updates using their listserv, and we'll post that in the chat. Great. We also have staff from South Coast on the call today who are here to listen to your feedback and answer questions if you have questions specific to this rule. At CARB, we see these zero NOx rules as complementary to our proposed zero greenhouse gas rule, and we're aiming to provide statewide consistency among space and water heater rules across the state. Okay, now I'll discuss the proposed greenhouse gas regulation. An important element of the regulatory design is defining the type of equipment that's going to be regulated. For water heating, CARB is considering boilers and water heaters, instantaneous water heaters, high temperature boilers and water heaters, and pool and spa heaters. We've broken down the boilers and water heaters into 3 groups based on heating capacity threshold using British thermal units per hour, or BTUs per hour. And a British thermal unit is the energy needed to heat or cool 1 pound of water 1 degree Fahrenheit at sea level. So I know that's very technical, but hopefully these typical applications paired with the sort of technical capacity and size limits will help a little bit. So first on the list are boilers and water heaters that are less than 75,000 BTUs per hour. These are typically storage heaters between 20 and 100 gallons and are found in buildings like single-family homes or an in-unit water heater in a multifamily building, or maybe in a small business. Second, are boilers and water heaters less than or equal to 400,000 BTUs per hour, which are high-capacity storage water heaters and high-efficiency condensing gas tank water heaters less than 120 gallons. Third are the really large water heaters that are less than or equal to 2 million BTUs per hour, and those are typically really large water heaters and small packaged boilers in large buildings. The proposed regulation also includes instantaneous water heaters, and again, the thresholds are based on heating capacity, with the lower threshold targeting tankless, also called on-demand or always-on water heaters that are usually in residential or small commercial buildings. And then the higher threshold is targeting tankless water heaters in larger buildings. High-temperature boilers and water heaters are typically found in non-residential applications like a dry cleaning facility, and may be used for sanitation or other specific commercial needs. Pool heaters are also included in the proposal. These are all placed into one bucket of less than or equal to 2 million BTUs per hour. And that threshold includes most of the residential and commercial pool, spa, and hot tub water heaters. Space heating is a little more straightforward. We're considering sort of 2 buckets. First, furnaces that are less than 175,000 BTUs per hour. Those are typically residential or small commercial space heating equipment, like a floor furnace or a wall furnace, or a central furnace that you would find in homes or buildings that are under 3,000 square feet. And then larger furnaces less than or equal to 2 million BTUs per hour that you would find in large residential or multifamily or commercial buildings. So I'll just pause for a second and folks can think about what type of equipment they have in their home or in their business. So the reason that we consider equipment between different end uses and then across all of these different types of thresholds has to do with how soon we estimate this equipment will be readily available at a reasonable cost and with a suitable variety of options. So CARB's proposed staggered compliance dates, which are listed here alongside the compliance dates in the South Coast rules, are presented here. So We've tried to align our dates as closely as possible with both the South Coast dates and with the Bay Area dates, which is another air district that has zero NOx rules, to try to get at that statewide consistency, and also have consistency around the dates that are based on technical feasibility. So as you can see here, the earliest compliance date is 2027 for the smaller water heaters, with the more specialized high temperature water heaters having the latest compliance date in 2033. So I know that a chart of equipment types based on BTUs per hour can be really hard to visualize. So this slide is here to help show, what the equipment CARB plans to regulate looks like. On the left side are images of equipment types that emit climate pollutants. So we have wall furnaces or natural gas tanked water heaters that you might find in your home or in your garage or in your business. Our regulation is technology neutral. So there are different zero emission technologies that are available now. Those include electric resistance technologies, heat pumps, solar. Fuel cell-based equipment is another potential option that might be available in California in the future. CARB staff anticipates that for the most part, heat pumps will replace the polluting appliances, and heat pumps are available today for a variety of space and water heating applications. There's some real benefits associated with heat pumps. First, heat pumps use about a quarter of the energy to heat spaces than conventional equipment. There's also a lot of variety among different types of heat pumps, especially those used for space heating. So there are packaged and split heat pumps that connect to existing ductwork. Mini splits are wall-mounted units that can be installed per room, and they can work in buildings without air ducts. And then there are even heat pumps that are specifically designed to work in cold climates down to 5 degrees Fahrenheit. So this is a diverse and emerging group of technologies. Heat pump water heaters are also available for small and large water heating needs. And one encouraging development is the 120-volt heat pump water heater, which reduces the need for upsizing the panel because it uses just a standard electrical outlet. Today, zero-emission technologies tend to cost more at purchase than conventional polluting equipment. But despite this, in many settings, households and businesses see equipment cost savings over time, particularly if they're replacing both a furnace and an air conditioner with a heat pump. Additionally, there are local, state, and federal incentives for zero-emission space and water heaters, and as more zero-emission equipment is sold, the prices should come down over time. Certain areas, though, could see higher operating costs for heat pumps, depending on the relative energy costs of that area and the conditions of the building envelope.
I'll skim these super briefly just to see the conversation, and then we can transition into our breakout rooms. So this slide we created to kind of capture some of the questions that are already bubbling up in the chat, and that might occur for somebody who's considering replacing one of their appliances. This is regardless of the emissions quality, if it's a polluting end use or a zero emission. You need to think about things like cost, finding a knowledgeable contractor, if you need retrofits, if your local distribution system's ready, impact on energy bills. So these are just some of the questions we've heard through our engagement work so far. And then, thinking through a renter perspective, and show the next slide, Awe. If you're a renter like me, things are obviously more complex. You have to work with your landlord, and you need their help for navigating these decisions, finding support with replacements. So while we can't, of course, answer these questions definitively for any given situation, because they're all so different, our intention tonight is to share some hopefully helpful information about what we know so far, and so we can think more about the resources that could be supportive as we're considering this transition. So one of the first questions we consider is the cost of equipment. And I just wanted to highlight a handful of really helpful statewide programs. There's a whole array of links here, and we'll also share them in the chat. The Tech Clean California program offers market rate and low income incentives. Equitable Building Decarb program is focused on low income and disadvantaged communities in particular. And as Jake mentioned, the Inflation Reduction Act incentives are also coming online through rebates that'll be administered by the California Energy Commission. We did a little bit of digging into your local utility and CCA incentives. Not as deeply familiar there, but the links reflect some of the initial information we found through cursory search. So heat pumps are being incentivized because other policy makers recognize benefits and want to encourage their adoption. Let's move on to the next page. So we also have, heard a question around the challenges finding a knowledgeable contractor who's willing to install zero emission equipment. Because it is relatively new, there might be some reluctance for contractors to install equipment they're not familiar with. Fortunately, this has been the primary focus of the Tech Clean California program, to get contractors on board, trained and with information so they get more familiar with the technology. They have a goal of really dramatically expanding the training programs available. And we have a listening session later this fall with the Construction Trades Workforce Initiative to learn more about needs for expanding the workforce. But one helpful resource that's available now is this Clean Energy Connection contractor database. They provide a list of contractors who are familiar with heat pumps that can hopefully ease issues in the future when it comes to finding someone who is familiar with and able to install that equipment. And here's a screenshot of the LA Orange County region. So we can go on. Another question that arises whether your house might need retrofits to install zero emission equipment. So you might know, like something like a heat pump water heater needs a lot more ventilation than one that runs off of gas or propane. And so you might need to adapt the doors of your water heater closet to include some ventilation slats. Electric service is another important element. Some of this equipment is higher amperage, needing a 240 volt circuit. And so you might need to check if you have available breaker space. There's some exciting innovations available to figure out how to manage load to avoid these potentially costly service service upsizing. And then also some things like smart meters, power saving devices. And if you don't have ducts already in your house, like Maggie mentioned, a mini split technology works without ducts. So those are just kind of attached directly to a building that might have been constructed without a central system. And then finally, for those who weren't anticipating having to replace their equipment and for whatever reason might have some readiness issue, there have been some exciting pilots for loaner and rental programs. So you get a piece of equipment that works with your existing circumstance and some time to work on the upgrades that might be needed to install zero emission. And then up here, of course, energy bills are really central in so many of our minds. Energy bills have been noticeably increasing in recent years, and there's a number of factors that will influence what the energy bill amounts to. Of course, how much energy is consuming, and then secondly, what your energy rates look like. So time of use rates are now default for most Californians. This figure sort of explains how they work. Now, the sort of most costly time for energy is between 4 to 9 p.m. when renewable generation, the tons of solar we have online, or in some parts of the day, we're generating more energy than the state's even consuming, super exciting. But as solar ramps down and energy use ramps up, that's the most costly period. So we have this on and off peak structure. And there's some like smart water heater technologies that can program your water heater to run during those off-peak hours when electricity, for instance, is less expensive. Propane and wood, as far as examined, are generally the most expensive heating fuels. And as Maggie mentioned, heat pumps as one zero emission technology are much more efficient. So that efficiency can often offset the differential in the cost between electricity and gas. But it's really critical that buildings and pipes are well insulated so that energy is not wasted in the operation of that equipment. So moving on, when we're thinking about our energy bills, there's other elements. If your zero emission appliance is fueled by electricity, there could be some utility side questions. So the California Public Utilities Commission is the state regulator for investor-owned utilities, including SoCal Edison, San Diego Gas and Electric. And we have links to a number of those kind of important proceedings where they're tackling some of the major issues. So if you need to upsize your service panel, there's typically a utility side element. And we've heard reports of delays to get those utility side changes made, and the CPUC is working to shorten those timelines. They're also thinking about the cost for that upsizing and different ways to distribute it so it's more affordable for low-income households. And public utilities, of course, have similar planning programs. Okay, so finally thinking to the question around renter implications, we've heard a lot of questions about this, and it's an issue we're trying to take as seriously as we can. So there's questions around what are the cost implications and even the displacement implications for a renter who needs their equipment replaced. Landlords do often have leeway to pass retrofit costs onto their tenants through increased rents. Some jurisdictions, like the city of LA, cap the pass-through costs, but not every jurisdiction has this kind of policy. There was also a statewide renter protection law, SB 1482, which applies to multifamily buildings constructed before 2005, but there's an exemption for substantial retrofits where the building's not habitable during construction. So one of the public experts informing our regulation development strategic actions for just economy developed a report where they talk about some of the applications of existing tenant protection laws and some of the needs to potentially work on strengthening those tenant protections in more jurisdictions across the state. Of course, tenant protections is not within CARB's purview or authority, but we have commissioned an update of this anti-displacement policy map. So hopefully renters are at least equipped with the information about the tenant protections that do exist and how to access them.